Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parsons Entrepreneur Academy webinar series. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Carly Ann. If you've attended our events before, you would have seen me conducting other interviews like this. I love having amazing lecturers, entrepreneurs, and experts on to share their stories and expertise with you. For those of you who are new to our platform, the Parsons Entrepreneur Academy's mission is to empower creative entrepreneurs like yourself with the skills that you need to build a sustainable business around your art. And we carry this out through our 3 pillars, which includes mentorship via our mentoring platform, training courses, and community via our network. So you can visit parsonsentrepreneur.com to learn more about our platform and these 3 different products. Tonight, I'm excited for us to be hosting our first interactive workshop in our webinar series. So we started hosting webinars over a month ago, and we'll continue hosting webinars in the coming months on various business-related topics tailored for you, the creative. Today's workshop in particular is going to teach you how to create a unique value proposition for your creative business. And it is going to be delivered by one of our esteemed ecosystem partners, John Jones, who is the Managing Director of Design and Strategy at PwC's Experience Center. Today's workshop, we're going to provide you with the tool or framework that John is going to be using, which is called a value proposition tree. So if you look in the chat, you will find a link to that workbook that contains that value proposition tree. Please click on that and download it. You can either follow along as we go through the different examples, or you can pay attention to the different examples, which I would highly recommend, and use that framework later on and apply it to your own business or your own idea. And just to explain a bit about how tonight's workshop is going to work. John is going to present for about 15 minutes. He's going to give an overview on personas and talk about, the importance of having them be very well defined and how those definitions impact your business decisions and the way you speak to your customers. He'll then he'll then engage with 4 live participants who we've pre-selected. Each participant will spend 15 minutes with John walking through their value proposition tree and get feedback on how they speak to their unique value proposition. So going through these live events, it'll help you all in the audience to gain a better understanding of this value proposition tree framework and how it works with various business stages. So some of the examples you'll see will range from different business categories, and they'll also represent different business stages. So if you are just about to start a business, this is a great workshop for you. If you are 2 years in business, it also works. And if you are 5+ years in operation, you can also use this tool. So all of these examples will cover all of these different examples so that you can learn how to apply it to your own business. If you have any questions along the way as the webinar or workshop goes on, please leave them in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom window. We won't be taking questions from in the comment section. So please remember to put them in that Q&A box and we'll address them toward the end. There'll be a 10-minute section toward the end where John will be taking or responding to questions that are in that Q&A box. And now I'd like to introduce our webinar lead tonight, John Jones. We're very lucky to have him with us. So John, as I mentioned before, is the Managing Director of Strategy and Design at PwC's Experience Center. He has 20 years of experience in service design, product design, strategic planning, and brand development across multiple consumer touchpoints, including mobile, retail, web, voice, outdoor, and wearables. His points of view on design have been featured in CMO.com, eConsultancy, Wired, How Design, VentureBeat, PwC Digital Intelligence, Digital Pulse, and other publications. PwC Experience Center spaces are canvases for innovation, helping teams develop solutions and prototype future-focused products and services. And now, without further ado, I will hand it over to John Jones.
All right, thanks, Carly Ann. It's great to be here. I put up the space from Parsons where we aren't really, but it's nice to see some of these beautiful empty spaces at Parsons. A huge fan of Parsons. You know, I've had a long relationship in working with the school, and I'm very excited to talk to this group today. One of the things that that I know comes up quite a bit in trying to figure out how to run your business is basically, in sort of simple terms, figuring out how to communicate what you do to your customers. And where that starts is trying to figure out who that customer is. So as you may notice, I'm using this tool that maybe some of you have used, some of you maybe haven't used, called Miro, which is a whiteboard collaboration tool. So, you know, you can zoom out and zoom into various things. You can make notes, post-it notes, create diagrams. So I think it's a great way to kind of collaborate a little bit more on how we're thinking about some of these things. So I think what's sort of interesting about a persona, and I know that some of you have looked at this quite a bit more, is it helps us as a sort of a proxy for who the customer is. And the way that I've done this before is the more specific, the better. And in some cases, the best kind of persona is where you think about just one person. So what's their life like? What do they do? I think one of the sort of interesting design stories, which a lot of people don't know about, is the typewriter, for example, was designed for one person. There was an Italian inventor who basically invented this mechanical typing tool for a countess who was blind, his friend who was blind, and that became the beginning of the typewriter. So if you think about all of us using these keyboards and so on for everything that we're using, it all started with designing for one person. So I think sometimes narrowing the focus so much to try to really understand what that person's life is like and creating a little bit more of a path for them is a great way to start. So some of the exercises that I've done with entrepreneurs before are thinking really specifically about who that person is. So very often the conversation starts with, I'm interested in a sort of an urban consumer who's interested in the following things. And then what we do is we drill very far into, okay, so urban, which city? New York, great. Which block? What neighborhood? What happens when they wake up in the morning? What are they doing? What are they putting on? How are they planning for their day? What's an event that they're thinking about doing tonight? Do they have an elevator in the building? Do they walk down the stairs? When they walk down the stairs and go out the door, they walk by a shop. Let's say they're interested in a certain type of shop. What do they buy there? What are they interested in? Who do they work with? And I think what starts to happen is it sounds super specific, but what it starts to help us understand is a very specific thing about that person's life and what we want to tell them to engage with our product or service. So I think what's great about that exercise is it helps us create a little bit more of a mental picture for who we're actually designing some of these things for. And not only that, but when you start to think about stores that they pass or other things that they're interested in, some of those become potential partnership opportunities. So if your product sits next to another product, sometimes in visualizing that person's life in a really concrete way helps us to find where those connections are between multiple products. So it's a really great exercise to do, basically telling that person's, what's the day in the life story of your customer and what makes them interested in what you're doing and where do they find your product? Is it in a certain store? Do they find it with a certain person? Do they see a certain person wearing it? If it's an apparel product, how did they find out about it? So then one of the other things that I think about too is once you know who your customer is, having a few guidelines to understand how much people can and can't actually take in is basically the sort of brain science part of this. So one of the things that I've been studying for a long time is some of these working memory studies. Turns out people can't hold that many items in their working memory. It's about 3 to 4 items, which is why we can't remember really long grocery lists when we go to the store. The studies indicate that for women it's 4 items, for men it's 3. So men can remember fewer items than others, which is why when I get to item number 4, going to the grocery store, I know I have to write it down. But what it also leads to is this understanding that you can only tell people really three things. I think we all have this experience, I know I do quite a bit, when you're taking notes on something, and there's always a fourth item, and you can never remember what it is. It's not accidental that you can't remember item 4 in that bullet list. It's because your brain doesn't really work that way, it turns out, the studies show. So that's a sort of an interesting one. You want to really simplify some of these statements, which is where this value proposition exercise comes from. And then cognitive load also, you have to understand the mindset that the person's in, because the more stressed your brain is, the less that you can take in and the less that you can process. So the other thing too is that if your product sits in a moment of urgency, there's really only one thing that you can tell the person. You're going to help guide them toward the answer to the thing that they're having a problem with. So the cognitive load is interesting, changes in times of stress. Color psychology is another great one that we'll look at in the visual design of a lot of these things. Red, for example, is very polarizing color in some cases. People don't read what's on red because they feel like it's an alert. Sort of an interesting example. Very often when we're designing things, I'll use blue instead of a color like green, for example, because blue feels like a little bit more of a pass-through color, whereas green also is polarizing. It doesn't always mean go. It sometimes means something where you want to pass through, which is why blue is sometimes a good color, as a very specific example. Symbol semantics is another one where we think about all of these icons that we're giving people. Nobody really knows what they mean, and we have to explain them. So in some cases, we want to simplify some of those things. So I think these four things are things that I'll try to keep in mind, both in designing for business, but also in designing for specific types of interfaces. And then one last one before we get to this value proposition tree. This is a mindsets framework that I've used before, which is when someone approaches your business thinking about what mindset they're in, and sometimes is fairly straightforward, is there's a level of urgency and an amount of expertise they have about whatever service that you're offering. So the example I give all the time with this one is if I'm a plumber and the pipe bursts in my basement and I go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you should treat me really differently than a first-time customer or than a first-time homeowner, because that's a person that needs to be guided and needs a little bit of a better process for getting there. So for anyone who signed up for services like Lemonade, for example, for insurance, one of the things that's really good about that service is that they assume it's super urgent. You're renting an apartment. You probably have never signed up for insurance before. And a lot of the people who have signed up for it say, you know, they almost feel like they signed up for it by accident because they made it so easy. And part of that is it's an urgent need. You have a novice user, and it's a very guided process in getting people through some of these things. And very often we're designing for this quadrant up here, which very few people are in, which is you have all the time in the world and you're interested in reading absolutely everything about my product, which is almost never the case. I think we can all sort of see that in a more practical way. So that's a sort of a setup in there where I think about, are they here for education? Do they just want to see if I know what I'm talking about, which happens all the time too? Am I trying to get them to the right answer really quickly? Or am I guiding them to something where they're having some difficulty? So sometimes looking at these four areas with a bigger focus on the pieces at the bottom can help us find where to engage people after we know who they are and we fit them in the journey that they're in. So feel free to put things in the chat. Hopefully I didn't go too fast through some of those frameworks. But one of the last things then is this idea of a value proposition tree. So I know who my customer is. I know roughly where to engage them in certain places. But this helps me to find out a little bit more about who they are and a little bit more about what I want to tell them. So knowing that you have a name for your service, hopefully some of the things are built into the name. And then if you only are allowing yourself 3 statements that you can make about your service, and those 3 things are appealing to certain types of users that you were really specific about, it sometimes allows them a little bit more of a way in. And of course, you prioritize those things too, so that the most important one is on the top. But it's a sort of an interesting way to think about how much, or in this case, how little we actually want to give people about the business. One of the things that that I did when I was teaching years ago at Parsons actually is I had the students go through and talk about their final project in 15 seconds. And if they couldn't do it, we took a pass, we went to the next person, and then we started to help pull together what would be that quick statement. And having these really simple bullets is sort of interesting. I think one of the other things about this too is that depending on who you talk to, you probably tell them different things about what you do. So I think it builds that in here is that, so if you have a core service name, the way that you talk about it is potentially different than the way that you might talk about it to a family member. Those three statements are related, but they're different. So I think what's good about this is it allows you the flexibility to figure out what three statements you want to give depending on who you're talking to. And then it's fairly straightforward. Hopefully what starts to happen then is these turn into marketing statements at some point, core service offering statements. And then it really helps you to differentiate because you can very quickly come up with those three bulleted statements. And then you can check to see if one of them is in market, which is fine. Two of them might be in market. And if the third one helps you to differentiate after you set those three things up, then your business starts to feel like it's special and a little bit more differentiated to your customer. Because if your customer never heard those three statements before together, I'm sure they've heard them all separately, but if they've never heard all three of them together, then it starts to feel like you have something that's a little bit different, that's very appealing to people. But it can't really be more than that based on what we know about how people's brains work and how they approach some of these services. So I think it's a sort of an interesting setup to kind of think about how can I boil down what I'm doing? And this is even before you get to design. What are the three statements? And then what it helps to do, of course, is when you have those three statements, how do I want to show it? How do I want to display some of these things? And then the design for the service becomes a little bit clearer as well. So you start to indicate then, do I want to visualize number one? Do I want to visualize number two? And then also it helps us to identify, well, what are the features now for each one of those statements that would make them true? So if it's about if it's about custom fashion, for example, what are the things I have to do? If custom is a word I want to be able to say, what are the features in the product that would make that statement true? So it allows us to very quickly identify whether or not our service is actually differentiated. So I'll pause there. And then the thing that we're doing over in the activities, if I haven't gone too fast, is to really start to take some of these things apart with some of our guests that have signed up to go through this exercise with us together. So I don't know if Carly Ann, you want to jump back in and make the introductions, or I'm happy to do that either way.
Sure. So the first participant that we have is Harmony. So Harmony, feel free to turn your camera on and just give a quick intro of you and what you're working on.
Yeah, so my name is Harmony Pilabello. I'm the co-founder of Altair, which is an ethical luxury modular footwear company. It's versatile, it's comfortable, it's really meant for professional women everywhere to simplify their lives and their closets. In addition to that, we also really treat sustainability from a holistic point of view. So it's going down to making sure we're supporting communities, limiting how much CO2 emissions we're putting out, donating to Restore NYC, which is a nonprofit that is near and dear to my heart. They're working to rehabilitate victims of sex trafficking. And yeah, that's pretty much the summary.
All right, so I've got it captured, some of it up here anyway. But I guess the questions as we start to, what would be the first statement if someone was asking you about your product line? What would be the first statement that you would make that you feel like is something that is special about the business that you have?
I think it would be the versatility because our shoes are modular and the straps are interchangeable. That is the most interesting part about our shoes.
Okay. And then the other thing that I've captured in here too, if people are interested, is I did a capture of 2 pages from the website. One of them is the home page, and then the first one is that after you select create a shoe, it takes you to the page here, which starts with size. So just curious about of these 3 things, the size, base, and strap, what made you want to focus on size first?
So because our straps are all connected with sizes, so one strap can be used on all the different bases, but they all have to be tied to the same size. So a size 8 strap has to go with a size 8 shoe. And because we also sell our items as separates, we may not always have the particular pair or combo that someone is looking for in stock. So by choosing the size first, it just makes sure that we only show them bases that are in stock and we only show them straps that are in stock and compatible with those bases.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And as we move back over to this tree over here, who the people that you feel are the ones who are most likely to be interested in the product? Let's just talk a little bit about your customers.
So they definitely live in an urban environment. I would say she's normally around 45 years old and has kids. Definitely uses a smartphone, usually shops on her smartphone. And that's kind of where I get stuck.
Okay. Well, let's do the other exercise then. I think this would be kind of interesting then. Let's do the one where, well, what city? Let's pick a city.
New York.
Okay, so she lives in New York. Where in New York do you think she lives?
In more family-oriented neighborhoods like Park Slope, Cobble Hill, maybe even Long Island City.
Okay, let's start with Park Slope. It's a neighborhood I'm familiar with, so I can sort of walk around in there. So if she lives in Park Slope, what kind of a building do you think she lives in?
She definitely owns the place that she lives in. It's either an entire brownstone or like a 2 to 3 bedroom apartment.
Okay. Okay, so she owns the brownstone. And then let's talk about, well, what does she do? Where's like house? What does she do?
She's in a leadership role, either as a CEO or she's a doctor or a lawyer.
Okay, which one would you choose if you were going to pick a profile for this person?
Ooh, I would say CEO.
A CEO of what?
Generally some sort of mid-range size business. Nothing like, not a small business and not a corporation.
So what do you think the business does? I think this is where it starts to break down in kind of an interesting way.
I think the business could be philanthropic.
Okay. Okay, so philanthropy, and then what kind do you think? Like, what do they do?
I would say they generally work on something that involves inclusivity of marginalized communities.
Okay. So this is great. All right. So now she's waking up in the morning. She's in her brownstone. What's she wearing? I think that's a good way to start because at some point she'll have to wear the shoes. So to sort of think about like what else is she wearing with them?
She is probably wearing something that will fulfill every single task she needs to do for the day. So if she has to go to meetings and then do something with her kids, she's thinking about the easiest thing to wear that will work for everything she's doing that day.
Okay. All right. So, So any brands that you can think of that might go with it?
I would say potentially more indie brands. It's definitely more focused on sustainability or female-owned companies. I'm trying to think more mainstream brands, potentially Mara Hoffman or Stella McCartney.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so she wakes up, she gets dressed in some of these brands. What she walks out of her brownstone, walks down the street, and then what does she pass that catches her attention? So what other let's say what shops does she pass that, or what places does she pass, or does she go to the subway? Does she go, like, what does that experience look like?
I would say she's very family oriented. So if she sees something in a window that could potentially serve her family, like a really nice meal that she could cook that evening, or maybe a cool book for her kid. And then a secondary would be some cool clothes that maybe she could use for herself.
Yeah. Okay, so what about coworkers? Let's say that she has something to do tonight after work. What would that be? What do you think she's going to do tonight?
If she doesn't have children to worry about, it would probably be a very small, intimate gathering with friends or coworkers. Nothing in a rowdy place, just a quiet dinner, maybe with some wine, but nothing too loud, or maybe even having a gathering at her home.
Yep. Okay. And then do you have a restaurant in mind? Doesn't necessarily have to be in Park Slope, but is there a restaurant that they might be going to?
I want to say it would probably be a high-end vegetarian or vegan restaurant.
Okay. So I don't know about you, but I'm getting very clear images of what might show up on the website, how we might sort of build a lifestyle around who this person is, which I think is pretty interesting. So the thing that this exercise starts to do, I think, it starts to line up not only some of the differentiating statements, because some of these things might actually reveal themselves in the marketing. So for small intimate gatherings might be something in there. The flexibility, I think, isn't in some of the statements that you have now. Being able to show a picture of her in this environment, where she's going, what she's doing. I'm getting a really clear idea of why, and this is sometimes why this exercise is good, is why she wants that particular product. So there's something kind of interesting, I think, emerging in here. Okay, so the following question is, so somehow in, where she's wearing Stella McCartney, she's at work, somehow she finds out about this product. How does she do that?
It's probably through word of mouth, or potentially through some sort of advertisement that she may have seen. We used to do small trunk shows in Park Slope and Cobble Hill, and that was frequently how people would find us. And then it turned into somewhat of a Tupperware party where we would be invited to their homes to meet their friends, and they would try on our shoes. It's very interesting, actually, that you say that, because that all of a sudden becomes a super interesting event, maybe to promote. I wonder if it's almost less about the shoes and more about these home party events. So it could be, there could be something really interesting in there with a kind of a differentiating service offering, which is with potential partner products, your products as well. But I mean, something that you don't hear about quite as much, but hopefully when we're able to go back into people's homes, this will come back a little bit more, is really thinking about what are the events around your products that are basically the lead of some of these experiences. And in some cases, it is about the shoes or the product, but in some cases, it's about something bigger. And it feels like we're kind of getting there. It's almost like you've got a social gathering
around the product that makes the product more interesting, but also possible for people to try. So what would we call them? What would we, if you were going to do those events, what would you call them?
I have no idea.
No, it's a Post-it note. So if you don't, if you have an event, what would it be?
Sip and shop.
Nice. That's nice. So if
Thank
you have one of your branded sip and shop events where these products are available, and then if you were going to take not only your product but someone else's product with you, what would it be to sort of to go with it?
I feel like it should probably be some sort of garment, something that could potentially go with our shoes.
All right, sky's the limit. Any brand wants to partner with you, who would it be?
This is a very obscure brand, but I would say Hostenvar. They're based in Norway, and she does really interesting things with vegan silk.
That sounds like a very cool event. I feel like we found something in here, but I'm not sure, but it does feel like the sip and shop event with your brand and their brand. I wonder if there's some ability to reach out to them and see if they might be interested in some kind of a partnership. I mean, I think we did this really fast, but at the same time, I think what I'm hoping comes out of this sort of journey exercise is then we go back into the tree and then we start to talk about it's not only modular and versatile, but the modular and versatile starts to change its meaning, because if there's a partnership in there, I didn't write it down because I don't know how to spell it.
That's okay.
I don't know. What do you think? I'm just wondering, I know we have to kind of go fast. I usually like to do these in an hour, but I think there might be something interesting in here. What do you think about what we've been through already in here?
I mean, I definitely agree with you. Having you ask me these questions, I was just even realizing that I had answers was interesting. Like, oh, I do know who this person is. I just needed to map it out with someone and have sticky notes, apparently. So this is definitely giving me a clear idea of how we could even create content for this person.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that's what I've done quite a bit with these things too, is that the pictures start to emerge. Like I have a really clear picture in my head. The only thing that I had before was the description in the shoes, but I think after this, I can see her. So I can see her, I can see where she lives, I can see this event, which sounds kind of awesome. Your new sip and shop event. Well, you not only had all of the answers, you had a name for the event immediately.
We'll see. To be determined. I do like it so far, though.
I do too. Yeah, this is great. I mean, we can keep going unless I'm out of time. I don't know, Carly Ann, how we're doing on time, but I mean, I could do this all day.
Unfortunately, it is time to go to the next person.
Thank you, John.
This was fun. Thank you, Harmony.
Yeah, thank you. This is super fun.
Thank you too.
All right, so
I can send you this too. I'll send you this board so
that would be amazing. Thank you.
All right.
All right. So next, I'd like to invite Mulsari.
Okay.
Up. So turn on your camera.
Hi there. Okay, so that was great. I was really excited to see how that tree was going to work. My situation is very different. I don't have a specific product. So I am my product to a large degree. I sell my talent. And I come from a branding and communication design background. But after 15 plus years of doing that for a variety of customers, both corporate and otherwise, I decided that I wanted to actually engage directly with the people I was working with as clients. And I do that in a variety of ways. I speak and train. I also do coaching, and I also do consulting. And I lately call myself a social innovation artist because a lot of my ideas and a lot of what I bring is, my goal is really to provoke people to see what they're missing, find their blind spots. I bring in a lot of things from a variety of topics, including philosophy and psychology and art and culture. And I also work for similar brands and companies like the School of Life as a speaker and trainer, while I'm building my own personal brand. So at the moment, my vision is that on the one hand, I do these sort of either coaching group or individual or consulting where I'm helping, let's say, a corporate design a culture of innovation and creativity. But in the meantime, what I'm really focused on right now is speaking. I do talks, I host events as well. I write. And finally, the third part, the artist part, I create a variety of different kinds of participatory and socially engaged artworks. Sometimes it could be an installation, it could be an intervention, it could be, more recently, before COVID, I was teaching people how to do nothing, even at scale. Like, imagine a whole conference full of people and I got them all to sit and do nothing together for 10 minutes. So it's really sort of stuff that gets people to jump out of their days, their everyday haze.
This is great. This is and then to your point earlier, this is a great one. I love this because I think it's hard to break through to people. So because the service is so complex and varied and touches a lot of interesting areas, I think let's try the persona exercise a little bit more. Who do you think? Who is your person?
Well, typically, I seem to connect with, well, actually, in a way, I can break it down to 3 personas. I very naturally connect to people in creative agencies. So when I train or speak to creatives, it's easy, it's familiar, it's comfortable. I can give them examples that I have experienced, right? So I can really challenge them out of their stuckness. Yep. On the other hand, more challenging, but they definitely need it, is corporate. So very much like sort of the, banks and let's say large Fortune 500 type chemicals companies, even product design companies, consumer electronics, people who are, in a very protocoled organization where everything has to happen according to rules.
Yep.
So that's my second, and typically the people I connect with are the entrepreneurs, like the ones who are trying to change things from inside, and they're frustrated and they're trying to. And frankly, I think this is my big ticket client, hopefully. And then the third is, actually, I do connect a lot to younger people, professionals who are either just starting their careers, they're looking for something purposeful, meaningful, they want to make an impact in the world. And I love working with those people because they also keep me fresh. But frankly, income-wise, that's like definitely the third, because right now I don't have the space to make my business all about that.
So, I mean, this is where I think the tree might actually work, because you had your 3 people in there. So if it's a creative agency person, what would be the first thing that you tell them to get them interested?
I've been there. I know your pain and frustration. Let me help you do things your way. Let me help you make you more effective, more impactful, give you the courage to challenge your client more.
Yeah.
Take better care of yourself and your team, be a better leader, and better agent of impact.
Okay, so then okay, so then there's another one. So then this is interesting though, make you more effective, and then we're digging into the features. So the how. So how would you do that? What are the three things that you would say, just starting with this one, to make it true for the person?
Yeah, the first thing I work on is self-awareness. So I turn the lens on people. This is where the coach role comes up, the coach and facilitator, where I sort of turn a mirror on people themselves so they can see themselves better.
Yep.
Then maybe the second one is sort of getting them moving, and that might be literal, but also conceptual. Like, so it might be, yeah, basically I put them in an awkward situation that forces them to get out of their let's say zombie mode that we all walk around in as human beings and as adults.
Yep.
So provoking them and shaking them into, yeah.
And then what about the third one in making you more effective?
And then the third one I think is actually much more about sort of, well, in a sense, designing your own vision. So that can be, you know, sort of like being very intentional about how you want to do things, making that very clear, in a sense, what you're doing with me now, right? So sort of getting people to articulate exactly what it is they want and then how to move forward with it.
So one of the things that, I mean, you probably have this already, but it does feel like there is a sort of a differentiated kind of ownable framework in here. And I wonder if leading with that, if there's something about sort of awareness or assess, move, and then design might be something that you could, even on the website is a little bit more of a profile, but I wonder if leading with a framework might actually lead back to some of these people. Because it sounds like you have one, whether you've written it down or not. It does feel like there's a way that you do this, which could be really differentiating. And sometimes, I mean, I think having done some of this myself, of course, is if you have a method, the method is what makes, is what attracts people to you. So I want to, this is sort of like creative strategy consultant, but if you have a sort of a named, proven method, I think that might be really fascinating for each of these groups, for all three of these. So what do you think? I mean, does this seem like it's getting close to sort of awareness, move, and design? I mean, it seems like there's potentially some different words for this, but it does feel like there's a reflection, getting a sort of maybe this is more about reframing in a way, right? It's almost like reframing the problem if you're getting them into an uncomfortable situation. And then it's almost like putting the pieces back together. And it sounds like you've got something, and maybe writing it down and having a diagram and showing that it's almost like behavioral science could really get people going.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the other thing. So I work in a very intuitive way, which took me a long time to develop, right? In the sense that I had to learn to trust my intuition. You know, I mean, I definitely wasn't even, it took me not just 4 years at Parsons, but also like probably the 5-10 years working after. But that's not enough for most customers, right? To say, oh, I work intuitively. They kind of need a little more proof. And especially these days, people want to see research and sort of numbers. And I sometimes myself wonder if that's almost like, yeah, it feels very not me. So I find myself resistant to that. What do you think about that? Should I play into that, or should I challenge them on that too?
I think you should challenge it, actually, because I think you have this framework, and maybe it just, it feels unnatural. And, you know, in the sort of, now we're in this stage, right? No, my turn. But I think that what's interesting about it is you have the framework. And if people knew you had the framework, I think the sort of describing of the service might be easier, because you say, you know, I've got this framework that I've developed over years of personal research and change. And it focuses on awareness, a personal movement and designing how you want some of these things to go. I think it might make it easier because you have it. And I think that the thing that's hard about the intuition side, I think, is that even if it's completely different when they get there, if they know you have a method, I think people, especially in these categories, and especially in the second category, actually, the corporate customer wants to know that you have a method immediately, that it's going to help them break their own silos inside the company. So I think that could be really interesting. And it feels like you have it, but maybe there's an either a sort of a resistance to writing it down.
Well, and I love that you mentioned the word silos, because that's part of it, right? So earlier when you were talking about the fact that people only remember 3 or 4 things, the thing that comes up for me is, yeah, but I don't want to break it down like that, simply because I understand that people, need that simplification. But in a way, everything I do is a version of the same thing. It just, it's just that, as you said, like, depending on who I'm talking to, some people need to hear the word artist, some people need to hear the word coach, some people need to hear the word speaker. But the problem is, when you live in the online world, on a website or on your LinkedIn, there's only so much you can say. You can't necessarily direct people into different channels as simply.
Yeah. So then this person, I think the first value proposition based on what we've been talking about is proof and method. Instead of breaking down, to your point, I think everybody talks about breaking down silos. But if you connect organizational silos, that might be a great thing for this person to hear.
Yeah.
And different, to your point, from self-awareness, moving in a new direction and design. I think this sort of 3-part structure is even more, is more targeted at that customer then.
Yeah, and I mean, what do you think about, I was actually considering, should I just write off the bat on my homepage, sort of say, well, I don't divide up my work into these different categories, because I'm trying to break down silos. I'm trying to break down these categories that we put ourselves into.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And I think that, here, let me see, what do we add? Years of personal research and change, breaking down silos, right?
I love that. Years of personal research and change.
Because you've been through it. I think what's so cool about the way you describe it is you've been through it. That's personal research. You've been in there. And I think describing it in that way might help set it up. So and then it could be a sort of a leading statement. So I sometimes find that doing this tree, break them apart, and then you figure out, actually, I want to focus on this customer. And I think this statement is the strongest one. Is sort of an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, and I just want to say, John, I feel so seen. I can tell you've read some of my pieces. Thank you. Yeah, but I love the way you phrase that. It's succinct. It doesn't downplay the work, and at the same time, it makes it relevant to the experience I'm trying to put forward to my customer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be afraid to make it sound really big, because it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think sometimes there's a resistance to making it as big as it is. And I think years of personal research and change, breaking down silos, is a great way to think about, oh, you know what? Actually, it's intuition, but there's a method to it. And it's kind of a big deal to be able to do that.
And also, I think what you've struck for me is that the intuition is the result of years of experience, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the framework is internal. You have a way of doing it. If you explain the method to people, it doesn't take away from the intuition. I think what it does is it just allows people a way in to your process.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to break that down when it's so internal.
Right.
So thanks for challenging that. I see someone asking what to define silos, just as sort of the categories, right? That departments, let's call it departments, that a lot of companies divide themselves into. Design
and technology, sometimes they claim to speak the same language, but we use the same words in really different ways. And those are the silos that, as one example.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it also connects to my attempt to, efficiency versus creativity is sort of one of the things I challenge, that you can't, create, if efficiency should come after you've had a chance to allow the space for creativity and things like that.
Yep.
This has been great. Thank you. I'm going to need a screenshot of that board.
Yep. Okay.
And also, maybe later you're going to give me some advice on pricing strategy. That's my next question.
Yep.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dawn.
Yeah, thank you. This is great. All right, Carly-Ann, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Mulsari. All right, next up we have Shakura. So Shakura, turn on your camera and give a brief introduction of what it is that you are working on.
So right now I am trying to really improve, I'm a freelance artist. I'm an actress, a dancer, and a writer. Actually, I was just hired to work on, to do script writing. So I'm really excited about that, and I can't wait. And I'm looking forward, I'm trying to get more work, definitely, to work more with brands and do more content creation. I also run a multimedia company. It's very new. So right now I'm trying to produce my own work and find sponsors as well. I'm trying to pretty much build my brand, and definitely I'm seeking more work right now.
Okay. So how, I guess the first question is, when you introduce yourself to people and doing all of these varied things. I mean, I think we talked earlier about my kids are all in the arts for some reason. And then I'm sort of interested in how you describe what you do. So what is if you're introducing yourself to someone, how do you talk about what you do?
I can talk about what I do. I guess what I do is a lot of freelance work. Do you mind rewording that question, I guess?
Sure, yeah. I mean, let's say you're at a party and somebody asks you what you do. I have a really hard time with this question myself.
Yes.
But what do you say? Like if you were at a party and you talk about people and you want to do the sort of quick version, what do you do?
I do a lot of experimental work. I do a lot of activist work, and I often combine them. I have a passion for social justice, and I have experience with conflict resolution. So I often combine the two in my work. My work often has a deeper meaning to it. I don't necessarily create art for art's sake, but it's often very functional. And yeah, it has a deeper meaning. It's very current as well, and it's just surrounded in pretty much blackness and queerness. So that's how I describe my work.
So I think it's really interesting sometimes at the center of some of these, there's always a through line. And it seems like you have a really strong one in activism, social justice, that leads to, so it's almost like you have a through line that connects to podcasts, it connects to performance, it connects to a bunch of other things. But there might be a way to talk about the center of it. The thing that you care about might be at the center of it. So maybe that's the place where we start. So what do you, in what you're exploring in art, what is the thing that you're exploring? What are you trying to find, do you think?
When I try to find, well, it's kind of like a self-practice for me. I try to kind of find myself, which I think it's really hard to be yourself in general. So I honestly find the significance in the fact that and other people have told me that they when I show up as myself, they actually find it really inspirational to be outspoken, to, talk about yourself freely, to express your opinions, to have this sort of carefree all attitude about you. And it definitely shows up in my work. Say in a rehearsal and they're doing lighting, and I always say I want to be seen as someone who has darker skin. Oftentimes I can't be seen in the production, so I feel there's this sort of that practice of like showing up as yourself and encouraging other people to be themselves as well, shows up not only in the process, but also in the like product as well.
That's a great one. So is the encouragement, I think, is really cool as a center point. Is this sort of like encouraging other people to be who they are might be at the center of what you're doing, it sounds like.
Yeah, actually that's yeah, I didn't even realize that, but that actually means like a lot to me though, to have this sort of support system in which people can feel comfortable in their own skin, and like have media that doesn't feel alienating, and like watch performances that aren't necessarily like stereotypical, for like have like thank you. So I'm reading the comments. But yeah, have performances in art and media that's like well representative and like fluid and not like in any old traditional sort of like racist, sexist, homophobic ideology.
Yep. So if you were going to have a sort of a brand in the center of this, what would that look like for you? What would be the sort of the brand pillars? This seems like a really strong one, is encouraging others to be who they are. It seems like it's at the center. I'm wondering, what are the statements around some of that might be interesting for you? I mean, I think there's a great thing emerging in here. I just want to get it right.
Definitely. I think like improvisation is one of them. Speaking from like the top of your head and not like, I mean, accountability for sure, but not necessarily worrying about like what other people think. Like creating space for others and creating space for yourself is like equally important. Just visually, I really see like, I don't know, like a lot of bright colors. I see like interesting shapes, like stuff that's like not traditional. Yeah, definitely. I don't know, like just improvisation, I guess, is maybe like my most important thing, I guess. It's just kind of this idea of like splattering
Right.
yourself, like splattering your thoughts sort of, and not worrying about like if it's like correct or if it's like right, you know, but it's authentic, it's you, and it's like, I don't know, it's unique, it's original for sure.
I love this statement. I don't know if that sort of jumped out to be you, but when you said that there's a lot of power in that statement. This is sort of splatter your thoughts is kind of an interesting way to think about not only your thing about encouraging others to be who they are, but the bright colors and the interesting shapes. And there's something kind of interesting, I think, about getting people to speak freely that seems to just be grouped into that statement. I don't know if that, I mean, you said it, I just wrote it down.
No, definitely. Thank you actually for this. I kind of thought I'd be all over the place. You're actually like really helping me a lot. Yes, definitely. I think that I remember reading how being like confined can interrupt your process for sure. And so that's like definitely part of my focus in my practice, is just to like let myself like flow more.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I think there's a nice sort of some brand pillars. And let's just put your name in the middle as the brand.
Okay.
I think there's something really interesting about some of these statements. Splatter your thoughts. There's a sort of activate the flow, which you also said. I just wrote down. They're also this encouraging others to be who they are. And I think what this starts to do, anyway, for me, is it starts to create a little bit of a world around some of the things that you want to be able to do. So here, let's just go to your personas for a second. I don't want to run out of time. I mean, as you can tell, I could do this for hours. Who do you think are your core sort of, I mean, let's not think about them as customers. Let's think about them a little bit more as participants.
Yeah.
So who are your core participants?
Definitely. Well, I definitely see my friends as them. They are like my hardcore, like, I don't want to call, yeah, not a fan base, but like my supporters. And they are just like, they have colorful hair. They're painters. They are also multimedia artists. So they're not just like a painter. They like also do performance art as well. So definitely people who do multiple things at once. Who kind of has like, they describe themselves as silly, as having a silly personality. And I definitely would say that maybe that my like audience would be like silly people as well.
Right.
People who kind of like care a lot, care deeply, you know, have a sensitive like spirit and like love to look at really deep content, because my content tends to go like really deep, and you know, that's definitely not for everyone. But I think the people who really like what I do, they're always like they want to have discussions about it too. Like I think
Yeah.
people who love to not only absorb but then also like discuss and put their own ideas out as well, like would definitely like my work.
I think there's something sort of cool in this friends and supporters one. I mean, it starts to come out in things like points of view with discussions. I mean, it seems like there's a great discussion thread on the back of one of these, which is a piece that you have. So if, for example, for lack of a better starting point, if you had a site that had a piece on it, you would definitely want to have the discussion thread on it, just to get people to talk about it. Sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So that seems like a great feature. If at the center of some of these things is just allowing people encouraging people to be who they are, activating the flow, splattering their thoughts. I think these are all things that kind of are at the center, not only of your kind of high level brand statements, but also I think they reveal the things that you should probably do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the past fits in there really nicely. The discussion on the back of the artwork fits in there really nicely. I'm psyched to see where all these things go, because I think I think to your point, it's not only there's not only some nice brand elements in here, but there's also, I think the thing that you were talking about was bright colors and interesting shapes. I think visualize this whole thing over here.
No, definitely.
It's like I feel like we're working on an art piece together.
I do too, actually. Definitely. I'm very much like still like learning a lot about, I never even, not that I never thought about having a brand, but like I'm very much new to like having a brand pretty much, and running like my work and my art as like a business, especially since I want to not only start going into galleries, but then also doing like gigs and performances. Definitely, I've panels. I think I talked about that before this panel actually started, but definitely like branching out and like, I guess being seen more for sure. It's like my focus right now, as well as not only just working on my art, but also how can I like get my art out there? Like how can more people see it and be familiar with like who I am as a person?
Yeah. So it seems like, based on what you're saying is that there's a few different, they're interconnected, obviously, but it seems like some of the participants are friends and supporters is one, maybe panel organizers is another one, where you have your statements that you make, and then art curators potentially as another one. But it does feel like you've got a nice sort of personal brand statement emerging in here.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
This is really fun. It's really fun working on this. I do appreciate just the willingness to talk about this stuff, because I know that it can be kind of uncomfortable, I think, trying to figure out where this stuff is. But I think saying it out loud sometimes is the best way to figure out where the center of it all is.
Definitely. Yeah. I don't know how like any like really huge like artists ever had like a career and like, you know, I don't know. No, definitely. When you think of like an artist like say Grimes, who is like a huge pop star, and definitely she has branding behind her.
Yeah.
She has a whole team, but in interviews, she's like, I don't know, she has a really interesting way of communicating herself. I don't know how artists like do that, but it's definitely a skill that you learn for sure. So I really actually appreciate being able to like see it right in front of me in like a chart.
Yeah, no, it's good to lay it out. And I sometimes feel like at the center of brand, like I know Carly Ann at the beginning just gave the long resume of things that I've worked on, but I think for me it's pretty simple. I'm very interested in people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the center of it is I love to ask questions and then help to kind of to understand people. So at the center of it, it's understanding people for me. And then it turns into all these other things like design and strategy and all of the things at companies and startups. But at the center of it, for me, it really is just about really wanting to understand people.
Mm-hmm.
I have this sort of thing that, you know, when we could walk around, is walking around the city and then just seeing that everybody that I see, I know that they know something I'll never know and be good at something that I'll never be good at. And I find that fascinating. It's just wondering what it is.
I have a question. How can this, so usually when I say I do all these like when I'm a multimedia artist, they kind of wonder, how can I put this? How can I tie these all together in like a package in which people can sort of like get it, understand how it all flows together? Like I'm also trying to do a media company, and I kind of see it as like mismatch. And so of course I understand that would be my job to sort of be like, all right, this is how it all goes. So then we can get past that question.
Part of it is, I think it's the brand statements that you have already. And then also trying to figure out, of these three people, or these three groups, what would you do? So I think that the friend supporters, taking these three brand statements and then saying, oh, well, I might do a podcast, or I might do an artwork with a piece of art with a discussion thread attached to it. Or I might have a way that I talk about, for the panel organizers, it might be a way of talking about creativity. And for the art curators, it might be a way of talking about your process. And then I think what's interesting about these statements is they all tie back to this.
Okay.
It's kind of cool, actually, the way that you're describing it, because I think you had way more of this than you thought you did.
I agree.
I'm just writing it down.
All right.
All right, Carly Ann, are we out of time, or are we?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Shakura. Next up, we have Janelle. So please turn on your camera and give a quick introduction of what it is that you are working on.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with the other panelists and all our guests and our great organizers, and with John. So I see my statement is here. I actually don't really remember what I put. Yes, I am interested in doing something with food. I have worked in healthcare for a number of years, and I'm ready for something different. I want to do something around food social justice. And at the same time, I want to do something with make food into fine art. So I think it's going to be really interesting to identify the core personas and do the whole map together.
Yep, great. All right, so let's start there. Let's start with some of the people that you think are your core personas. Like who do you think is your number one customer that you want to describe this thing to?
I see this business evolving over time. I guess initially it would be someone who really has an appreciation for beauty. I think everyone does in their own way have that appreciation. Someone who loves beautiful objects. For example, during quarantine, I learned how to make macarons.
Yeah.
And they're these beautiful little French cookies, and they come in all these different designs and colors. And I think it would be really amazing to learn how to make them at a really advanced level, so it almost becomes a piece of art.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I want to do something that is really big and that kind of, I don't know if I want to use the word disrupt, but something that can have a big impact on our food systems, because I see that as being critical. And so I guess I don't know how to reconcile those two things, or if they're just different.
Yeah. So that is a really interesting one too, because there's potentially two really nice tenets in here. It's both, I mean, locally sourced comes up quite a bit, but also there's something sort of creating a little more beauty in the sustainability. I think sustainability is a strange term for these things. I think because everybody has a different definition of what it means. So if there's something about what is it in the food system that you think is a problem that you're focused on, maybe more than other problems?
I myself have faced, this gets a little personal, but I've faced some chronic GI issues, and I have slowly started to heal those with the help of certain types of whole foods, and with some professional help. And I think many people, at least throughout the developed world, face issues with the types of diets that we consume, the so-called American standard diet. And I would love for there to be a way to get more healthful foods, more whole foods to all kinds of different people, including people who normally can't afford those types of foods.
Yep. Well, and then I think that the way that you were describing it, I actually think is a little deeper than there. It's almost like healing foods. It's not even about, it's more healing.
Yes, yes. But at the same time, I love the fun, sugary macaron. So
yep.
Yeah, I it's going to be interesting to see where this goes.
This is an interesting one, actually, because those three things sometimes don't come together. It's a sort of fun, sweet, and healing all together. Sometimes don't actually come together. There's maybe something kind of interesting about that.
You know, I see doing a multifaceted food business where I have some kind of teaching kitchen, or can set something like that up throughout the world. Maybe it's in humanitarian conditions. Maybe it's here in northern Michigan, where I live currently, where we do have a lot of rural poverty that goes unseen. Maybe it's teaching young children in different parts of the world, or youth, about entrepreneurship through food. And I actually have a friend in Mombasa, Kenya, who is a baker and has a similar business. She teaches women how to bake, and then they open their own businesses. So it's all kind of these things all mixed together. And then maybe I also have a food truck. Maybe I have my own macaron shop.
Yeah.
Lots of different ideas.
And it does seem like there's something, I think what's good about the way that you're describing it, though, is it seems like there's something really connected at the center. There's a little bit of a focus on fun, some focus on color, some focus on teaching, focus on beauty, focus on healing. that makes all of those other things connect to each other. Because I think the food truck then becomes something really specific based on what you're talking about. It could both be a food truck that's focused on teaching, creating healing foods, but also teaching. So it could be a little bit more about, you know, teaching and healing together in that sort of portable environment.
Right, I like that. I hadn't even considered that. Somehow I put together teaching with brick and mortar. So I love that mobility of that idea.
Okay, so teaching, there's some, I don't have it quite right. But there's something about, I think, this sort of teaching and teaching about and creating. It's a little clunky, but it's about the making and the teaching of healing foods. Well, there, maybe that's it.
Right.
That could be a way to go. So
yeah, I really believe this education piece is huge for me because I've spent so much time having to educate myself about what types of foods work for me. And I know for millions and millions of other people, the education piece would be so huge to improve other people's health. And we have, you know, in our culture here in the States, we do have this kind of green eating revolution going on that's been going on for a number of years, but there's still so much more work to be done.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
And I think that to your point earlier, it doesn't have to be a sort of a people in school sort of feeling. There is something fun and colorful
Mhm.
about this whole process that could be really different. It could be very differentiated for you if it's sort of a fun, colorful teaching business that's focused on healing. I think sometimes teaching as a word and healing as a word sometimes don't go together with fun and colorful, but it does feel like there's potentially a way to do it that makes it more attractive to the people that you're trying to bring to this kind of business.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's in keeping with who I am. You know, it like someone earlier commented, and I love the comment, you are your own best business model. So
Yeah.
I think I am colorful and fun, and I am also a healer, and I have that to offer to the world. And this, I think this is actually my vision coming through, and I'm in the early stages of that.
Yeah, now this
Yeah.
could be really good, and I don't, and I also feel like there isn't a lot out there that combines these things in this way. So I think there's potentially a really nice way for you to build on this. And then the food truck is kind of interesting too, because if it's portable, maybe part of it is the food, and then part of it is either supplies or sort of like a pop-up teaching environment.
Mhm.
Um, it could be a sort of and then the colors of the truck start to come into play, and it becomes a sort of an interesting way to think about getting into some of the communities that you're talking about too. That could be this could be a beautiful business.
Thank you. And again, I really love it. I think the portability of that type of service is so can be deployed to various places all over the world. I am looking to be international at some point.
Yeah, and then at that point you start to think about, well, what's the kit? Because as you think about you know, having done a lot of events too, as you think about, well, what's the portable kit? Because there could be a sort of a permanent model, which is people come to you, and then there's the kit model, which is what are the minimum number of items that you would need to take it on the road. It doesn't have to be a truck, could be a truck, but could be a kit of parts that you take with you to be able to do this wherever you want to do it.
Interesting. That's really good to know. Maybe I'll have a plane someday.
That would be amazing.
Teaching plane with a kitchen.
I'm putting that down here.
You know, I think about this because we have throughout the world, we have more displaced people than we've ever had, you know, more than World War II. And unfortunately, I think with the crises of the last few years, decades, those numbers have only increased. So I just see so much need out there, and I see a lot of need here locally in our country.
So I think we almost have a brand statement in here too, if we can find it. It is something about healing. It is something about fun. It is something a little bit more also about service in some way. I think there's a real service part of this service, but really about serving people. And maybe that's something that we log here also. This is about serving people.
Service.
Fun, sweet, and healing foods could be a.
I love that. And service is really important to me. It is one of my core values. And I'm curious how that works, how values work into the value proposition tree.
I think they do. I mean, sometimes what I've done before is a little bit of a collection of just simple words. It's sort of a light word map where you put together, and this is sometimes how I've done naming in the past too, where you put a lot of words on the page. And I have this sort of, it's a funny exercise I'll sometimes do where I'll write the alphabet forward and then write it backward, and then look for letters maybe I left out of some of the words. And then you start to build a little bit of a collection of, well, what are the words that I want to represent my brand? And then you start to assemble them in a way that has some of these things in them. I think we found some good ones, but I'm sure that as you start to look at this, you'll find more. But it does feel like we've got, I mean, this isn't a great name, obviously, but I think, you know, we've got at least what's starting to emerge as a statement that you could hang these other things on. So the kit, the airplane, of course, with the kitchen, which that's going to be great. And then how does it all come together? So starting from the simplest kit of parts. So what would you need basically as a kit to be able to do this? And then the other thing that starts to happen is maybe the kit becomes the product. So you take the kit, but also it could be something that you provide as part of the service, is that if you can't go, you can still send the kit.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. And maybe some way, form of instruction, like the kit comes with a link to an instructional video and tips for recipes, depending on your context, your situation, what you have available.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. And again, I think the education piece is huge, you know, teaching others how to get these skills. In fact, I'm enrolling in the local culinary school here locally.
Awesome.
And yeah, so I'm starting that program and thinking of how to teach others. Someone suggested in the chat, even starting with online classes.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of, I haven't been to culinary school, but it does feel like that would be such a great thing to do.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you.
All right, so, and then there's, I think one of the things you were talking about too is this idea of teacher training. I mean, maybe part of the kit also is that it's sort of a train the trainer kit in a way, that if you can't go, you send the kit, you also teach the teacher. So if there are communities that could benefit from some of these things, that you could not only provide the service, but also help train people to do some things that that you might think are valuable.
Right.
This is great. Yeah, I'd love to see this one come together. This is going to be a good one. Thank you for talking about this, because I think, I mean, like I said, I'm just writing things down and asking questions.
No, this helps me so much. I really appreciate it. It ties all these disparate ideas that are in my head together. And it's amazing how it's all synthesizing. And this exercise and you are great. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for talking about this. I don't know, Carly Ann, if we're running out of time again, but I mean, I could just, it's hard to stop.
No, I mean, this is amazing. It's always great to see you in action. I think, looking at the chat box, it's really active with activity and people putting forward ideas. They're really loving you and the exercises you just did. So we are running out of time, but do you have like 10 extra minutes to go through some of the Q&A? Okay, awesome. So we'll get to that. Everyone who's watching, again, we're going to drop a link to our network in the chat. So it's free to sign up for the network. That's where you'll find updates on more webinars like this. And we're also going to be archiving this workshop, but for Parsons Entrepreneur Academy network members only. So we'll kick off the Q&A section. All right, so we have a question. This is anonymous. I don't understand the core service name. Do you mean the brand name?
Yes. Yeah. So at the center of it, sometimes what you'll do is the name will change sometimes depending on what those core services are. So this one was a good example where what we started to do is figure out, well, what is it? What are we trying to do? And then all of a sudden the name starts to come out because we did all of this work to try to figure out, is it about healing foods? Is it? And all of a sudden the brand name starts to emerge. This one isn't great, obviously. I mean, it could use a lot more work, but I think in the cycle of this process is not being too precious about what you think the name is, because in order to present the service, sometimes it comes back to not even having to say more than just the name, and then it ties back to the whole mission. So yes, the brand name.
All right. So someone asked, how might I do a persona for an inclusive?
You're breaking up, or maybe it's me.
Oh, how might I do a persona for an inclusive production company?
So this is a really interesting topic. I've run some workshops recently. There's a great book by a woman at Microsoft. I can't remember her name now. I have the book on my counter over here, but the inclusive design sessions we've been trying to run are really looking for exclusion. So I think that sometimes inclusion is hard to do, but exclusion, people who have been excluded are really easy to find. So a lot of the things that I've been working on with this good friend of mine, Jason De Silva, who has a group called Access Lab. And they have a site called Access Map that crowdsources accessibility ratings for locations. And he and I have talked a lot about how to easily find what to do with inclusion, because you look for exclusion first and then solve that problem. So how can we make people who have been excluded feel included by designing a service not for them, but with them? So I think there's an important distinction in there, which is just like we're doing now. I'm not designing anything for anybody. We're designing them together. And I think one of the mistakes that's made in design is that you heard a story about somebody and you think you can design for them, but you can't. You have to design with them. So part of what I try to do in some of those sessions is really try to identify people who have been excluded and then design with them something that can be really for them, because we designed it together. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm just trying to figure out how to do that in the right way. But I think looking for exclusion, and this is Kat Holmes is her name. So Kat Holmes at Microsoft wrote this great book on called Mismatch. And part of, I think, what I took away from that book was really looking for exclusion as a starting point.
Hi, I have a brand statement is fully, a brand statement, a fully designed website. What would you recommend as the next step in developing my business?
Well, without looking at the website, it's kind of hard to to help. But I think one of the things that that sometimes is this value proposition tree exercise is really good for the website, because if what you do is you start usability testing this with people and asking them the hard questions that maybe you don't want the answers to, which is, here's my website, what do you think I do? That's sometimes a great way to help refine some of those statements. So when people first land on these things, you have a couple of seconds of their attention while they try to figure out what you do. And you may want to just ask people what they think you do. One of my favorite usability questions when we're designing interfaces is before you press that button, what do you think is going to happen when you press it? And it's never what the button does. So it's always something different. And then we change the name, we change the position, we move the thing around. But I think asking the question of the people that that you think your service is designed for is a great way to figure out how to include them basically in the process of designing it.
All right, if I run a multidisciplinary design office, how can you narrow down a specific persona for the ideal client? And this person might have gotten some ideas from you going through maybe Mulsari's example.
I think, I mean, you can do some kind of research to sort of figure out where potential revenue is with certain types of people, and all of the standard sorts of metric analysis. But at the end of it, I think in some cases you have to pick. You have to choose, let's say 3 people that you think you're designing for, and then you start to do the research exercise, which is the qualitative research exercise, which is I'm going to interview some of these people and then try to figure out how they think. I think one of the things that I do in design research all the time is really try to understand people, not try to get them to answer questions. So what are some problems that you have with the following thing might not be great. Whereas if I understand what they're trying to do a little bit more, it makes the research better because you find things you weren't looking for. So I don't know if that quite answers the question, but I think in some cases it's a hard decision. But if you're working with a company, or if you're working with certain types of people, I think some of those things start to come out, and then you have to talk to the people to make sure that they are actually the persona you think they are.
All right, what does in market mean? Does it mean what is trending?
In market means basically that it's out there. So I think that that what I was talking about, I know what you're talking about, where some of the products that you have, if there's another product that's similar in the market. So I think what you want to make sure that you do with this differentiation is make sure that you don't look the same, but you look like your own personal version of whatever the service is. So sometimes what we'll do is launch a service that's very similar to another one, which is fine. And then sometimes we feel like we do it better, or we do it in a way that's more specific to the people that we want to attract. So I think it's fine if other things are in market and we want to launch something that's similar because we think we're going to do it better. But that idea of in market is just other things that are out there too.
All right. Hi, if I were offering apparel to a customer, how is it a core service?
If I were offering a what?
Apparel.
Oh, okay. How is it a core service? Oh, I see what you mean. So within the context of this, so I mean, the core service as apparel, I mean, I think what's really interesting about apparel is sometimes apparel isn't really about apparel. Sometimes it's about lifestyle, or sometimes it's about, there's something else that you're providing. If it's about a certain designer, that there's a designer who has a certain point of view and you're interested in that person, and it changes, because if it's just the product, then it starts to become a little bit of a commodity. So it becomes something that, you could buy at Uniqlo or something. But if there's something else in there that makes it a little bit more yours, then there is a service element to that product. which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. Is it's sort of like the product is the service in a way.
All right, so this is the last. Yeah, this is one of the last ones. I'm a multidisciplinary entrepreneur, creator, artist, and coach. I'm looking for the best way to introduce what I do in a succinct way. How might I market my product in an attractive way to multiple markets? My niche market seems different in each of those areas.
I mean, I think this is a great exercise for you because it'll help you pick your person. So what I try to do with this thing too is you pick who you think your customer is, and then only 3 things that you can tell them. I think it's actually a very hard exercise to do because it forces you to make decisions that maybe you're not ready to make, but by making them, I think it helps you define what the business is. So, I mean, I would suggest trying the worksheet out and seeing if it works for you, because it might. I mean, it's hard, but it might actually work.
All right, can there be a few personas?
Can there be a few personas just in the world? Or
That's the question.
oh,
maybe can there be a few personas that they're catering to
yeah,
in their business?
yeah, and I think it's good to figure out where the separation is. Sometimes when I'm doing personas, I'll almost always do 3. Partly because I'm a huge fan of the number 3, just in, sort of cognitive design, but also I think if those 3 personas are really far away from each other in who they are, it helps you to kind of broaden what the business is about, but it doesn't allow you to be any less specific about what they are. So I think it's good to have more than one because it helps you make sure that these are the people that you want to be able to serve.
All right. So those are all the questions because you had you have a lot of fans in the chat, John. People want to know if you're on Twitter or on Clubhouse. We definitely have to have you come back and do other engagements in the future, but we'll talk about that and we'll keep you all posted. But do you have any social handles that you want to share?
I mean, I do, but I do, but I don't. I mean, I think I spend so much more time with people in person and doing things like this that I don't spend a ton of time on social media, sadly. But I'll send them to you. I mean, most of the things that I'm connected to, they're called JRJ Media, which is like originally a company that was my own a long time ago, and I never lost. Everything is basically JRJ Media for me. So, but I also wanted to say thank you so much for this. I would love to come back. This is super fun exercise to do, and thank you so much for the invitation. Because I mean, we've known each other for a long time, and I do feel like it's always great finding a way to meet up in these ways.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Harmony, Janelle, Shakura, and Mulsari for being a part of this. You all volunteering to do this. It really helps when entrepreneurs are together and you get to actually learn from each other's journeys and challenges. And I could see that definitely reflected in the chat. So thank you all. And John, it's always great collaborating with you. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you about having you come back because this has obviously resonated so well with a lot of people and was extremely helpful to everyone who attended. So thank you so much again. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, join the Parsons Entrepreneur Academy network if you want to be able to look at the replay and also get updates on future workshops or webinars or to find out when John's coming back. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much.